As a constitutional law attorney, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello and welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show. I am obviously not Jenna Ellis. My name is Tho Bishop. I am the content director for the Mises Institute, and it is an honor to be able to share this microphone today. We're going to be talking about a very important issue, money, and particularly what has government done about it, to it, and the danger that some of the proposals out there have for your civil liberties, as well as why this is relevant for the recent Argentinian election and the rise of Javier Milei. But before we get to the show, here are some advertisers for your enjoyment.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you.
Welcome back. And the topic today is what has government done to our money? I had a conversation this morning with Jenna on her radio show, and she asked me to talk further on this issue, particularly with the rising news reports of central bank digital currencies, a topic that I think has really captured a lot of attention, properly so, from areas in the conservative audience that recognizes the weaponization of the government that we have seen in the last several years, and that providing another very scary tool to us. I think it's also relevant with the elections down in Argentina. I'm guessing that many of you do not closely follow South American politics, probably good for your mental health, given the way a lot of the elections down there turn out. But I think there's some relevance here because really, if we are looking at this moment of populism, if we're looking at this moment of obviously economic crisis here in the U.S., rising inflation, rising interest rates that make it harder to afford a house, that are affecting your credit card bills and the like, just this gradual erosion of Americans' quality of life that I think the majority of Americans are feeling in their gut, and I think that might be reflecting some in the political polls. We recognize that there is something fundamentally wrong with where this country is, and a big component of this, not all of it, but a big component of this is the socialization of money. And this is a topic, it doesn't come up a great deal in Republican debates. You're not going to see it talked about on Fox News to any great length. And there's a reason for that. You have very serious economists and, Ivy League trained intellectuals and the Paul Krugmans of the world writing in the New York Times and all these outfits that don't want you to think about money. They don't want you to think about banking. They don't want you to think that you are educated enough to understand these issues. And this is all a deliberate ploy to hide what really is the biggest driver of the modern state, this ever-growing Washington behemoth that is robbing from us, that is making not just us worse off, but future generations worse off. And the reality of it is that money is not that complicated. It's an issue that the founding fathers thought a great deal about. It's an issue that motivated American politics for a very long time. You can think about Andrew Jackson, his war on the bank. You can think about, some of the earliest populist movements that were motivated by concerns over the money. You could think about the 1970s, where you had construction workers mailing 2x4s up to the Fed because, similar to today, the consequences of higher interest rates were having an effect on their business. And so if we're going to understand money, for one, it's important to just kind of recognize the obvious, which is just how important it is to our day-to-day lives. If we kind of just take a big step back for a second and we think about what really is an economy. Don't ask an economist. Sometimes you'll get a very convoluted answer, but really what an economy is, average everyday people producing things, providing a service, doing something productive with their lives, taking the property that they control and figuring out ways to not simply take care of their own individual household, but to create, a surplus, right? If we're not living off our home gardens like you might have back in a older age, right? We all have different skills. You might be writing economic articles like I do, right? You might be flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. You might be selling real estate, right? These are all different skills. We can survive. We don't need to build everything in our lives. We don't need to be making our own clothes and growing our own food. And thankfully for me, because I don't know how good I would be at those things, we can do this because of money. We trade our services for money. And this is what makes civilization grow. This allows us to think ahead, to save for the future. This allows us to calculate how we value certain things, which is a very important dynamic. Do I want to spend, $5 on a very, well marketed bottle of water versus have the dollar store version of it? What other things could I do with that extra $4 I save, right? This economic calculation is a core to what makes capitalism the economic system that has brought so much prosperity and material well-being to our lives. And so when the government captures that fundamental element of it, when it captures the money, when it socializes the money, there's very big consequences of it. For one of the reasons why we have a government as large as it is today that does all sorts of things very rarely well, that affect our day-to-day lives, a big part of it is because that sort of core democratic check, the legislative process to decide how much the government spends, is completely broken. The Fed, for a very long time, has been able to print as much money as it wants, borrow as much money as it wants, take in as much debt as it wants. And therefore, that fundamental dynamic within this economy breaks any notion of self-governance, any notion of political self-determination, any notion of democracy. And the biggest advocates, the biggest defenders, the biggest cheerleaders for the Federal Reserve, for the central bank, that is beyond the audit of normal people or even members of Congress. That is a relatively new invention. Our Fed came about in 1913 and has changed the way it's operated a number of times since then. Most recently, 2008, big changes that people don't like to talk about. The biggest cheerleaders of it are the elites, or the intellectual class. The Fed is the biggest employer of economists out there. They're the biggest provider of research grants out there. And surprise, most economists out there defend the Fed. Their incentive is to do so, the same way that government giving out grants to climate scientists tend to continually create propaganda about climate alarmism and justifying the government having a bigger control over all aspects of our lives and the right. There's incentives at play. And it's important to understand that for all these fancy economics papers, for all these big degrees, the Fed is fundamentally broken. Its assumptions are based off of lies, printing money, printing more paper, or more accurately in today's world, adding more zeros on a keyboard. None of this creates goods and services. None of this creates real wealth. All it does is confiscate it. It waters down the value of your work. It undermines the value of your labor. And when you think about the generational dynamics going on right now, and you think about younger Americans finding it harder and harder to buy that first home, to save for the future, there's a big reason for that. When you have an inflationary environment, which is when the Fed creates more and more money, which is what we've had. It's been kicked into high gear of late, right? Ever since COVID, and sending checks to everyone and shutting down the real economy and gas prices going up and all these dynamics that obviously has played a role in the increase of prices of everything. But really, we've been living in an age of inflation really since World War II. The Fed has targeted a 2% inflation rate every year. They made up that number because it sounded very scientific, but there's no underlying real reason for that dynamic. But we've been having it for close to 100 years by now. Prior to that, worth noting, inflation had pretty much stayed flat throughout American history. If you look at different kind of core items, right? You saw a little bit of inflation in times of war. It went back down after the war. After World War II, relatively modern, we've had a policy of deliberate inflation ever since. And the people that are hurt most by this are workers, and most importantly, the younger generation. Because the one asset, there's all sorts of financial assets you can have, right? You can own your home, you can own stocks, you can own CDs from the bank, right? Variety of financial assets that you can hold. The one thing that you cannot save is your labor. You can save the salary you get, you can put away some, but you can't bottle up even 1 second of your actual labor. And so as the cost of living goes up, it's the people that work paycheck to paycheck that are entirely reliant upon what they get back from their labor that find themselves further and further down from the rest of the economy that is able to invest in real estate and stocks and all these other assets out there. This is why we saw during the Obama years, after the financial crisis of 2008, where the Fed made all sorts of changes, where they started buying up a whole bunch of assets. If you were speculating in real estate, if you were holding stocks, your well-being, your wealth went up dramatically. If you were not buying stocks, if you were not buying these assets, you stayed flat. It changed a good amount during the Trump years, tax cuts, regulatory reform, all sorts of supply side elements. You actually started seeing salaries for normal people start going up. But you still have, and again, of course, COVID changed that a great deal. But even then, the underlying economic incentives with this inflationary environment made it so that you were better rewarded by investing in stocks rather than saving in a traditional bank. It creates this culture of enhancing risk in the economy, right? Investing in a company, particularly when we saw rises in startup tech companies, or a lot of money went into, say, crypto companies and like. There's a lot more fundamental risk there than saving in a traditional bank where, once upon a time, right, you could get a very reliable rate of return. This dynamic of changing what is called the time preference of a society has not just economic consequences, but cultural consequences. It rewards short-term thinking at the expense of long-term thinking. And this is another reason why recognizing the reality and understanding the significance of this monetary issue is something that particularly conservatives who think about the future, who care about their kids, who care about a lasting legacy for their families or for their nation. These economic philosophies of today are very bad for a civilized country. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the ways the Fed plays this game is by pretending that these are things too complicated for you to understand. One of the great illustrations is that the maestro, Alan Greenspan, who was revered within Washington and the press, right? He was the man that could save the world, that could change markets by his utterances at hearings and the like. When he went before Congress, he would use very complicated words. He was master of saying nothing in front of Congress. And if you look actually at the meetings where the central bank heads all gather together and talk, they actually use real language. And particularly during the Bernanke years, where we saw quantitative easing, which was massive monetary printing, massive buying of assets, they recognized that what they were doing was incentivizing speculation, incentivizing risk, hurting savers. That was the entire point. The entire point was to prop up the stock market using low interest rates so that money was very cheap and relying upon that to build the economy. Well, this dynamic, I think, is what fueled and what gave way to the economy that led so many Americans to support and cheer on Donald Trump. The erosion of the manufacturing base, the erosion of small town America, the damage done to the working class. If you listen to the left, and unfortunately, a lot of intellectuals in the Washington right as well, they blame capitalism for this. They blame foreign trade. They blame, libertarianism and the like. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of faults that you can find with a lot of libertarians out there, particularly on some of the cultural issues. But that is not what eroded away the American economy. That is not what created a dynamic eroding away that all-important middle class of America. It was the Fed. Again, it was the socialization of money and banking. And so what you have right now is an environment where trust in banks has gone down. This trust in the government as a whole has gone down. And this is what has created the stage for, rather than having a political class that recognizes that it's spending too much, the Fed also plays a role there. Lower interest rates makes it easier for the government to spend at a cheap rate. One of the issues we have right now is that with interest rates rising up, payment on debt payments, payment on interest is a lot more expensive than it used to be. Janet Yellen, with all of her, again, very serious education, was one of the few people out there not refinancing debt at very low levels. So that's creating a problem that Congress is probably going to kick the can down the road, but probably needs to address sometime sooner rather than later. But this dynamic has led governments, not just in the US, but around the world, to try to figure out new ways of manipulating and weaponizing this socialized money against the people. This is where central bank digital currencies come in. And there's been a drumbeat for really almost a decade now that one of the biggest problems we have in modern society is cash. And the reason why cash is a problem for governments is that it's very difficult to track. You can ask how many waiters and waitresses claim their cash tips on their IRS forms. Hopefully very few of them. It makes it, cash is a financial instrument that's very difficult for the government to control. They can inflate away the value, but they can't really track what you're doing. And so here walks in the perfect globalist technocratic solution: central bank digital currencies. And they are building off, in some ways, right, the increased popularity of Bitcoin. Bitcoin really has nothing in common with the central bank digital currency besides the digital element of it. Bitcoin, for any other problems you might have with it, Bitcoin is non-political. It is independent of the state. Central bank digital currencies are simply a further step towards controlling what Americans can, or any citizen, how they make transactions, what they can buy, whether or not they can save or not. One of the aspects of central digital currencies is that it's programmable. So if you're saving, they can program it so that your savings goes away after a certain point to really incentivize you to spend. This is a very real threat. Again, very serious economists have been talking about these tools of getting cash out of the system for a very long time. They usually do so in very boring, again, this academic language, but ultimately they do so because of the need for further control. One example of this is Marvin Goodfriend, who was actually a nominee that the Trump administration put out there for Federal Reserve one of the Federal Reserve governors. And his candidacy was stopped by Mike Lee because one of Marvin Goodfriend's big passion projects was to eliminate cash from society, pushing for negative interest rates as a policy tool. And what negative interest rates are effectively a tax on your savings, right? If higher interest rates means your savings gets more money over time. Negative interest rates would penalize you for savings. And so we've become very close to having people within the Fed actively cheering on the central bank digital currencies. They're already having workshops and these sort of groups talking about the viability of this project. Now, thankfully, in the US, technically, according to law, the Fed is not authorized to do a central bank digital currency. But of course, as we've seen, governments, particularly when they can blame an emergency, they don't typically follow the Constitution very often, right? You have a crisis and everything goes out the window. And we saw this play out in COVID. We saw this play out with money and banking issues, even with banks like Bank of America that was spying on American citizens. If you were an American citizen in Washington, D.C. on January 6th and you were a Bank of America customer, they're telling the FBI all of your transactions and the like, right? So any veils of privacy, any veils of constitutional restraint, we've seen how the way that the government as it currently works dismisses any of these checks on its power to do what they want to do. This is what has led governors like Ron DeSantis to preemptively try to stop any use of central bank digital currencies within the state of Florida. We'll see if the Fed goes through with this, how that ends up playing out. We've already seen central bank digital currencies go into effect in obviously nations like China that has used this as an extension of their social credit system. We've seen European countries get very serious with this. We've seen the IMF talk about their projects for a central bank digital currency. And so this has become, again, one of the greatest threats to our civil liberties in modern times. And so the question is, what can we do about this? Well, first and foremost, education is key. Again, the Fed, this intellectual elite of economists, they don't want you thinking about these things. Now, I work for the Mises Institute. Our main mission is economic education. We do it through books for high school students, programs for college kids. We have articles on our website every day highlighting some of these real economic problems. We've got all sorts of lectures and books and podcasts and all the content that you want. You can find more about that at Mises.org, Mises.org. We're named after a great economist, Ludwig von Mises, who was a proud defender of capitalism, whose views forced him to flee Nazi-occupied Austria, his homeland, had him flee to America. But even when Ludwig von Mises fled to America, the intellectual landscape under FDR had shifted so much that his ability to defend and educate about capitalism was very much limited because of how much the economics of the left had taken over higher education. So higher education, or educating yourselves about free market principles, about the foundations of education, of foundations of money, it's one of the most important things that we can do. We also need politicians to recognize the threat that the Fed poses to us. We've seen the past, right? Ron Paul made this a big part of his presidential campaign. You have other Republican politicians that have talked about the value of the gold standard. The gold standard was very important because that was a non-political measure of money. You can't inflate away gold. The government can't magically create more money. They have to buy gold like anyone else. So the gold standard was a very important check on the way the government can inflate and print and create money out of thin air. So you've had Ben Carson supported this. Ted Cruz has talked about it. I think even Newt Gingrich in 2012 talked about the value of the gold standard. Alex Mooney, who is a congressman from West Virginia, he's talked about the gold standard. That is one way of checking this uncontrolled socialization of money. Another element is taxing. If you eliminate the taxes on gold, on silver, on Bitcoin and the like, it would make it a lot easier for Americans to save with these assets so that even if you're using the dollar in your day-to-day transactions, You can put your savings in something the Fed can't inflate away, and you won't be punished for that if the value goes up and you have to pay capital gains taxes. And this issue, again, if normal people understood this, and normal people understood just the extent to which these intellectuals and these government agencies and these government bureaucrats were ripping us off on the dollar, utilizing the dollar to undermine our civil liberties, using banks to spy on us, understanding just how rigged this underlying financial system is, the system that is unjustly blamed on capitalism and is radicalizing young Americans to believe in socialist policies and politicians like Bernie Sanders and AOC. If we recognize that the American way of life is being undermined fundamentally by the Federal Reserve and this broken monetary system, then maybe that can get people to act. And this is exactly what we saw in Argentina. Javier Milei is an economist who is a fan of Ludwig von Mises, someone who has educated himself with the material of the Mises Institute, who reads Mises.org, MISES.org. And he just won the presidential position of Argentina. And he did so with a campaign attacking the central bank of Argentina for many of these same reasons. Argentina's inflation rate significantly higher than ours. Argentina's dealing with inflation for generations now. And a big push that supported his campaign were young Argentines who have only grown up in a nation in decay. Not that long ago, 1950s, Buenos Aires was seen as economically prosperous, as a similar golden area to move to as California was in the United States. It wasn't that long ago. Unfortunately, socialists, Peronists, as they're called, after a particular socialist politician of Argentina, they've controlled the Argentinian economy for decades now. And the result is triple-digit inflation, and again, devastation for younger Argentinian generations. People got fed up. People took to the streets. And you had, in Javier Milei, someone whose style and tone very similar to Donald Trump. If you saw his interview with Tucker Carlson, you see a lot of that same fire, a lot of that same sort of populist attacks at the elites, at the corrupt, someone who understood that the underlying system of the Argentinian government was corrupted, someone who was an outsider willing to do something about it. And because enough of the Argentinian population, because you had young people that blamed socialism, not capitalism, because you had people that recognized just the devastation that these bad financial policies were having on their quality of life, on the future of their kids, of their grandkids, of their nation writ large, people came out and they elected a radical presidential candidate that now has the opportunity to follow through on his promises, to eliminate the Argentinian peso, to have free competition in money so that you have something more valuable than this inflated away peso to put your savings in. Someone who understands the need to get rid of their central bank, someone who wants to cut, I think it's 2/3 of their government agencies. All of these bureaucrats, all of these government officials who are parasites on the Argentinian people, on their economy, they had a very bad day when they woke up and saw Javier Milei as their new president. So again, education is so key to this. I know Jenna does a great job of educating on the values of the founding fathers, on the importance of America's ideological foundation. These ideas that, they want to demonize and attack and call you all sorts of names if you stand with them, if you care about them, if you want to restore them in this country. These are the building blocks for a free and prosperous civilization. Again, the founding fathers understood the importance of sound money. They saw inflation run away during the Revolutionary War. They've seen, our nation understood the damage done by giving the political class, by giving industry the ability to corrupt money and banking for their own special interests. We need in America an awakening like we saw in Argentina. We need Americans, particularly proud, patriotic, conservative Americans, to educate themselves on money and banking, because there's not a single issue that is a bigger threat to the entire economic system that's propped up all these elites, propped up all these globalists, propped up all these big businesses at the expense of small businesses, that has destroyed our savings and undermined our quality of life and our pathway to living out the American dream. than money and banking in America. And so it's been a great honor to be able to fill Jenna's seat today. If you are interested in learning more about this topic at all, again, I encourage you to visit the Mises Institute at mises.org. You can send me an email at Tho, T-H-O, it's a weird name, I know, but T-H-O at Mises.org. Be happy to send you some information if you have high school students, if you have college students, and you want to protect them from the indoctrination that they're going to get within higher education. Understanding this issue is so important. And actually, we have a 9-part animated video series, a cartoon that breaks down a lot of these issues that I've talked about at whathasgovernmentdonetourmoney.com. If you're interested in that material, I hope you'll check it out. This has been Tho Bishop filling in for Jenna Ellis on the Jenna Ellis Show. Thank you for your time. God bless America.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to your to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you.
My friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help you get the best night's sleep of your life. He didn't stop at the pillow. Mike also created the Giza Dream bed sheets. I have them. I love them. These sheets look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep, which is crucial for our overall health. Mike found the world's best cotton called Giza. It's ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's latest deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets marketing prices down as low as $29.98, depending on the size. So go to mypillow.com and click on the radio podcast square and use promo code Jenna, Jenna. There, you'll find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and so much more. I have all of this. I love it. Everything from MyPillow and also mystore.com. You can use promo code Jenna. So go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, and also mystore.com. And remember, use the promo code Jenna.